The
See.
80-20 rule, I suggest to all my clients
Yeah.
is running an 80-20 rule against your inventory and your sales and even like your marketing spend. It's really eye-opening for most founders.
Yeah. Interesting. So that's, I mean, I'm familiar with the 80-20 concept, but for the benefit of those listening, can you just clarify what you mean by that and how
Yeah.
it would work in this context?
So the 80-20 rule or Pareto principle basically is like 80% of your output comes from 20% of your input. So
Yeah.
an easy explanation would be like if you had a restaurant and you had 100 items on the menu, you're probably making 80% of your revenue off of 20 of those items. The other 80 items are
Yeah.
just kind of there. So it's really defining
Hmm.
like what your best sellers are and what's making your business the most money, and then prioritizing
Mm.
those accordingly to protect the business.
Got it.
And you'll see that
Okay.
across multiple things. If you have 10 employees, most of the work will be done by two of the people. The other eight just kind of like
Hmm.
flounder around. If you have
Yeah.
10 customers, most of your sales will be two customers. The other eight will kind of like fill in the rest. And so you'll see that
Hmm.
in every part
Hmm.
of your business. So it's a great exercise to kind of run.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. Very nice. So I want to ask from where I sit wearing the CFO hat, I see a lot of the financial consequences of bad operations, right? It comes comes to the surface in the form of stockouts. We have excess inventory tied up. We might have too much debt as a result. There might be inventory write-offs and, inventory true ups at the end of the year that we need to do. So I'm very aware, obviously not as close to them as you, but I'm very aware when there are operational problems in a business. I'm curious what your perspective on finance is as an operations and supply chain guy. How do poor financial systems impact your job as an operations guy?
Yeah, I mean, cash flow is the lifeline of a business, right? And I think one of the things that shocks most CPG brands that are new to it is what that life cycle looks like. So I don't think they all realize that you have to pay for inventory up front. And then if you're not moving that inventory fast enough, if it's sitting in your warehouse for 3 to 6 months, that's 3 to 6 months before you get your money back on the investment you spent. And so I think it's
Mm,
understanding that kind of cash flow. And then again, it doesn't matter how efficient your operations are if you're not making the margins that you need to make, which again, the cost of goods
mm,
sold thing is a big thing with my clients. And so the finance side is very important. There's no point in running a business if you're not making money. And then it's like, okay, now we're making money. We have good margins.
mm,
The way I put it, and it's pretty common sense, but for some reason, it executionally doesn't seem to resonate with people. Is it's supply and demand. That's what I do, supply and demand management. I view the world through supply and demand.
mm,
That's all I know. But
mhm.
demand comes first. Supply is just fulfillment of demand. So a lot of times when you're
Right.
talking about excess inventory and all this kind of stuff, it's people, the assumptions that there's this demand out there. And so they start building out
Mm,
this huge supply chain, buying inventory, doing all this kind of stuff. And they never really validated the demand, and the demand isn't there. And so it's
mhm,
going out and making sure the demand's there. And then part of that making the
mhm,
demand there is making sure that you have the right market price, that your price meets what the market wants. And then once you have that and the demand and the pricing and the costing and stuff like that, you know how much it costs to fulfill, go out, get the
mm.
demand, and then fulfill the demand by building out your supply side. And I feel like
Right,
most
right.
people kind of have that backwards. So it's understanding that, and that's all finance. That's every business. I have someone that I mentor who's not in the CPG space, or they're a photographer, and he's
Mm,
been stalling this to start his business. And it's like, well, what are you waiting for? He's like, well, I need, $7,000 so I can go buy a camera. And it's like, that's a supply side issue. Why don't you instead take your reputation as a photographer,
yeah,
go book a wedding that's 6 months out, get a down payment, and now you have the demand. Now you take that deposit
yeah,
and go buy your equipment, and you have, so it's demand first.
yeah, absolutely. So true. Yeah, I see that all the time with with founders, and actually spend a lot of time talking to founders about the risks and uncertainties that we have around bringing a certain product to market. And, you obviously have to source it, you have to manufacture it, you have to finance it, you have to ship it. But often the greatest risks around actually launching a thing is figuring out, as you say, like how to sell it. And I have found is, putting tens and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars into new product line and getting all the inventory when we haven't actually validated the demand yet. And there isn't a lot of certainty that we're actually going to be able to sell this product. And I'm actually chatting with one of them at the moment about a, potential new product launch and saying, why don't we just like mock up a product listing? You've got some samples of this thing already. Let's put a page up on Shopify, verify that people actually want this product and that we can sell it. If we happen to get some orders and we don't have the inventory yet, like it's not the end of the world. We'll either refund them or we'll send them a different product. Maybe we'll give them a free upgrade. It's not a problem. But, you can do that sort of thing for hundreds or, a few $1,000s, and it's so cheap and so quick. And, it oftentimes addresses, the biggest risks in product launch, which are very rarely about manufacturing in my experience.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny because the bigger you get, the worse it gets. So at the larger companies, what happens is when they launch a new product, they have to have a certain financial threshold to warrant it. So they'll just kind of make up a number just to get it approved by the board. Right? Like, oh yeah, we got this product that's going to do 10 million.
Wow.
And they never really validated it, but they just wanted to get it approved. And then once the product's launched, they kind of wipe their hands. So they don't really care what it did in post-launch. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And then
that's kind of opening up a whole can of, sorry?
Yeah. I was gonna say, when you have smaller brands that really can't negotiate MOQ, they basically just get stuck to whatever the MOQ is with the manufacturer.